Over the last 2 years, the United Sorghum Checkoff has put a lot of resources into sugarcane aphid management. We've funded numerous studies across the U.S. Looking at sugarcane aphid. Various research topics have been covered, and then we've also put together a lot of information just from an educational standpoint. This is going to be a series of seven videos where we're highlighting different topics for sugarcane aphid management. This particular video will discuss late season sugarcane aphid control. If we look at the potential yield loss that can occur with sorghum at the different growth stages, the later in the season that you get, or the further along the sorghum is when the aphids infest it, the less yield loss occurs. In this particular table, and this was put together in Mississippi State University, at the soft dough stage, they're suggesting that you get about a 21% yield loss if you don't treat. Really, I think that can be higher than that, particularly if it's early in that soft dough stage. As you get later, closer to hard dough stage, and I think maybe it's a little closer to that 20%. But it still can be very significant. So certainly in that soft dough stage, you still need to be treating for sugarcane aphid and looking at the threshold and treating accordingly. Now, when you get a little later and get into the hard dough stage, then the yield loss, or the direct yield loss, is going to be somewhat less. The next two slides are going to show examples of sugarcane aphid and their effect on yield at different growth stages. So this particular slide is from data from Kansas, and it's showing what happens when the sugarcane aphid infest sorghum at the boot or heading stage. So if we look at the data here, when the sugarcane aphids came in and reached, in this particular case, 125 aphids per leaf at flowering on September the 5th, if the insecticide application was delayed until September the 14th, so we're looking at 9 days, the yield loss was close to 90%. So certainly early on, at the flowering stage and before, you've got to be on top of the aphid and control it right away. Now, at the hard dough stage, there in Kansas, there was very little yield loss, and really not a significant yield loss at all once it was in that hard dough stage. Now, I think if we had had some very high sugarcane aphid numbers, we may have seen a little bit of a yield loss, but in this particular case, we did not. So in this example, we go from August 30th to September 14th, and those aphids increased from 50 to 300 aphid per leaf. There still was not any effect on the yield at that point. Now, what can happen in that hard dough stage, and certainly when you get to physiological maturity, the aphid can cause some lodging issues, or just directly interfering with the harvest from aphid numbers and particularly the honeydew that builds up on the leaves and the head. And so that's what I want to address in the next few slides. So sugarcane aphid at harvest. Again, at this point, the yield has been made, so the plants can literally be covered in aphids and not directly impact the yield. But as I mentioned earlier, you can have some lodging issues, and then just have some issues from being able to efficiently harvest that crop. And what can happen is you can have your concaves and sieves basically just get plugged up with aphid material and leaf material from the honeydew. And so we did do some studies to take a look at that and see what we can do to minimize the effect of the sugarcane aphid on harvest. This particular trial that we're going to look at, or this set of data, was conducted near Amarillo, Texas by Dr. Bynum out at the Bushland Experiment Station. But in this particular example, we had very high sugarcane aphid populations, late in the season, and the sorghum was really ready to be harvested. So we had sugarcane aphid numbers up into the 2,000 per leaf in this particular field. And what we were looking at was a series of treatments of herbicide and also some insecticides. So the blue bar on the graph represents the untreated, and on the y-axis is the number of aphids per leaf on the upper leaves. The light blue actually is a Sodium chlorate treatment, or a defol is the actual trade name of that product. And the idea there was just try to quickly dry out the leaves, which in turn would hopefully kill the aphid and then reduce those numbers. And then we also had a glyphosate treatment. And again, the idea there was just to kill the plant so the aphid wouldn't have anything to survive on. And then the green bar is malathion insecticide, and then the purple is Savanto Prime at a reduced rate of 2.5 ounces. So if you look at the evaluation days of 4, 6, and 11, and just look at that 4-day after treatment application, the light blue bar, the sodium chlorate, in this particular case reduced the aphid about a third compared to the blue bar, which is the untreated. So it did reduce that sugarcane aphid population just after 4 days. Look at the red bar there, the glyphosate had no effect at all on the sugarcane aphid, and that makes sense because it takes a while for that glyphosate to work and to actually kill the plant. The green bar, actually the malathion treatment, did a nice job of knocking the aphids back and reduced that population really about well over 50% 4 days after treatment. But the best treatment was a Savanto Prime at 2.5 fluid ounces, where it clearly knocked the aphid population back significantly. If we look at the 6-day rating, the sodium chlorate wasn't quite as effective at that point. The aphid numbers were a little bit closer there to the untreated, but still somewhat effective. Again, the Roundup or glyphosate was not doing anything, and now the aphids are beginning to come back in that malathion treatment, the green bar. So good job early on at 4 days, but 6 days, aphids are beginning to come back with the malathion treatment. But again, the Savanto Prime treatment was doing a very good job. And then somewhat similar results there at the 11-day treatment. And then again, the Savanto treatment is doing a very good job. But now you see where with the malathion in the green bar, the aphid population is right there where the untreated was. And then again, the glyphosate, a little bit surprising here, but the glyphosate, even after 11 days, had not reduced that population of sugarcane aphid. Okay, on this particular slide, we're looking at the effect of the various treatments on the sugarcane aphid in the grain sorghum head. So the previous data that we just showed was the effect of the sugarcane aphid on the leaves. In this particular data set, if you look at the y-axis, the rating scale is from 0 to actually it's to 5, with 5 being a very heavy infestation of sugarcane aphid in the head, and then 0 representing no aphids. If you look at the 4 and the 6-day treatments, and that's our best set of data, actually between the 6-day and 11-day, we actually had a significant rain that washed a lot of the aphids out of the head. So really what we want to look at is that 4 and 6-day rating. What we notice really is as we look at this data is that the Roundup and the sodium chlorate or defol treatment really had no effect on the sugarcane aphid in the head. However, both the malathion and the purple bar there, the Savanto, did do a good job of significantly reducing the number of aphids in the sorghum heads themselves. This third slide is actually looking at the honeydew in the grain sorghum head. And again, we're looking at a rating scale of 0 to 5, with 5 being heavy and 0 none. One thing you'll note is that really the honeydew was not all that high to begin with, really in the head itself. But similar to what we saw with the sugarcane aphid numbers, the glyphosate and the defol or sodium chlorate just had no effect on honeydew, but yet the malathion and the Savanto Prime at 2.5 ounces did significantly reduce the honeydew in the sorghum head. So if we summarize this data, at or before the milk stage, an insecticide application should be made as soon as possible once sugarcane aphid has reached threshold. Otherwise, severe reduction in yield certainly can occur. At the late soft and hard dose stages, more time can occur before a treatment application without significantly losing yield. However, you can still lose yield. In fact, you will, particularly in that soft dose stage. So you do want to get that insecticide application on just as soon as you can once you reach that threshold. But once the grain has reached the physiological maturity state or got into that late hard dough stage, any loss from sugarcane aphid infestation is going to be a result of lodging or possibly from poor harvest efficiency. In our late infestation trial, or a pre-harvest trial that we did, glyphosate was completely ineffective at reducing sugarcane aphid numbers or honeydew on the upper leaves or in the grain sorghum head. Now, this trial only lasted 11 days. It's possible that if we would have carried that on out 15 and 20 days after the glyphosate had completely killed the plant, then we would have expected at some point those sugarcane aphid numbers to drop off drastically. But it would have taken more time to do that. And then, of course, the risk with glyphosate, if you wait too long to harvest, is you tend to get some lodging issues. With sodium chlorate, we did reduce the sugarcane aphid about 50% on the upper leaves and in the sorghum heads. Malathion did reduce the sugarcane aphid population to about 66% 4 days after treatment, but only reduced population by 9% 11 days after treatment. However, honeydew in the head was significantly reduced on all the rating dates with the Malathion treatment. Clearly, the most effective treatment was the Savanto at the 2.5 ounce rate, where sugarcane aphid numbers were reduced 73% 4, 6, and 11 days after treatment. And really, if we'd have used a higher rate of Savanto, I think we would have certainly even gotten better control. And just to remind you again, the labeled rate of Savanto is 4 ounces, but in this particular study, we were just trying to knock those aphids back and did do a good job really with that 2.5 ounce rate. Now, we didn't have Transform in this particular test, but we would have expected really Transform at that 3/4 of an ounce rate to perform very similar to what Savanto did in this study. It should be noted that the pre-harvest interval for Savanto is 14 days, and the same is true for Transform. Malathion and glyphosate, that pre-harvest interval is 7 days, and then there's no pre-harvest interval for the sodium chlorate label.